My name is Marcel. I'm with GS1. For those of you that don't know GS1, I'm going to keep it very, very, very simple. So we're a global standards organization, both for identification and barcodes, but we also have a whole raft of standards around different types of symbologies, different types of identifiers, and also importantly, how businesses share data with each other, with retailers, with government agencies, and also with consumers. And that's it. I'm not going to tell you anymore. For those of you that do know GS1, I know that you probably have a perception of GS1 being a very technical bunch. We love to talk about the technicalities of barcodes, and we get into all sorts of really technical details. We've got a book of acronyms that I carry with me because even myself, I forget oftentimes what they mean. The good news is that today I'm not going to talk technical. I'm not going to have a single acronym on my slides. Instead, I'm just going to talk about the one thing that always has and the only thing that ever will have the power to transform the way we work and live. So one thing, and that's love, right? So my presentation today is going to be about love. There's not going to be no well, there's going to be some barcodes in there, but it's basically, it's about love. And particularly, I want to tell you a love story that's actually touched my heart. And it's actually a GS1 love story. And I hope to share that with you today, and I hope it inspires you to go and find out more about this love story. So the love stories started once upon a time, back in 1973, on April the 3rd. Matter of fact, April the 3rd is next Monday, right? So we have a 50 years anniversary of the birth of the GS1 barcode. You can see him there on the left. The traditional, one-dimensional EAN13 with a 13-digit identifier that both speed at point of sale. He basically, since he's been around the world, he's learned a few things. So he's learned obviously how to automate point of sale transactions at retail point of sale, like it goes speed at point of sale, transaction gets done, consumer walks out with the goods they want. He's made lots of friends around the world. There are about 2 million brands out there use this GS1 barcode on their products packaging, and approximately 1 billion products since it's been around have carried a GS1 barcode. It's actually made it the most widely accepted supply chain standard around the world. And obviously he's been invited to all the retailer parties, all of the brand parties, during his life. And the BBC, in fact, believes that the barcode is one of the things that have changed the modern economy. It's been so prevalent in the way in which we do business and the way in which we do commerce. It's one of the 50 things that led us to where we are today in terms of commerce. So that's the little barcode, the little GS1 barcode 50 years ago. Meanwhile, something else was going on in parallel. The internet was born in 1983, almost 10 years after, which kind of makes it cool, right? So he's 50, she's 40, it's okay. We're not gonna go after for that one. So she was born almost exactly 10 years after that. And she also, just like the GS1 barcode, started with very humble beginnings. I mean, you remember dial-up internet, really slow speeds. Very, very quickly, she became embedded into pretty much everything that we do around commerce today. I don't think that the BBC has named her one of the 50 things that made the modern economy that they should, because she's also been just as successful, if not more, as the GS1 barcode. Anyway, these two little things basically live their lives separately. They had common, friends in common. They were sometimes invited to parties together. They kind of never really met. And so they knew of each other, and all of that changed on the 7th of March, 2014, recently, right? So they officially met. They understood each other, they chatted, they went on a couple of dates, they got married, and they had a little baby barcode, which we call a GS1 digital link enabled 2D barcode. Now, there's a lot of technical stuff that I can tell you about this procreation and exactly what it means from a technical perspective. I want, other than to say that it simply is bringing the standards that have existed for 40 years around the internet and how the internet works. The standards from GS1 around data and how we structure data inside barcodes, and I've basically merged them together. That's basically what has happened, and we call that standard GS1 digital link. And you can embed data inside 2D barcodes, whether it be QR codes or GS1 data matrix, using that format. And it basically completely changes the way in which the barcode can work for you. Whether you're a brand, a retailer, a solution provider, a packaging printing company, whoever you happen to be, it's basically going to revolutionize once again the way in which we do commerce. So our little hero, it's been on a mission since 2014. So it basically wants to make a lot of friends like that around the CPG sector. And he wants to do that because he wants to help the CPG sector do a whole bunch of things. So first of all, to provide a very seamless way in which brands and retailers can engage with consumers, directly connecting the product to its digital twin and finding a wealth of information about that item, but also accessing a whole bunch of digital services that can sit behind the barcode. Today we talked about a lot about decreasing food waste, decreasing packaging waste. I'll give you a couple of examples later as to how that in fact happens. Enabling end-to-end traceability, our premier case study that we're going to discuss today specifically about that. This little barcode can also help you fight counterfeits, improve inventory management. And the most recent the conversations around what can be enabled that is basically taking place with Australian industry and government is how you can actually link certificates that make a claim about your product being compliant with something. Typically, a claim could be about whether your product is kosher, whether it's halal, could be a certificate about the amount of embedded carbon inside the product. It could be a claim about that product coming from a supply chain that is free from modern labor. And so these certificates are becoming increasingly important in the context of global trade. And it is another area where this GS1 barcode can help you. And it can go deep at the point of sale. So what does that mean? Well, it means that in future, we may potentially see packaging of consumer packaged goods that only have a QR code with GS1 digital link. We know that, yes, we're in a transitional period, and we're expecting to see an explosion of QR codes with GS1 digital link on products packaging, but together with the EAN13, because that provides you with the lowest common denominator. You want your product to go deep at every single point of sale around the world, right? And there will be some retailers that don't have the capability today that they will have that in the future. These little guys love so much that the retail sector and the CPG sector have come together and have agreed on a date on when that's going to happen. And that date is 2027. So by 2027, the retail industry globally have agreed that point of sale systems around the world will be upgraded to be able to scan 2D barcodes at point of sale. And from that moment on, a conversation around completely migrating to 2D barcodes can begin to take place between brands and the retail partners. But not until then. Until then, we'll be in this transition and we'll see both codes on pack. All right, so let me give you some examples of what our little 2D frame has been up to since 2014. So I'm going to give you a few examples. The first one is about Woolworths. Now, in Australia, Woolworths as a retailer is in fact leading this transition towards 2D barcodes. So the first retailer that have adopted it, they have now rolled out capabilities nationally across all stores, supermarkets at the point of sale system, so they can scan it. And they basically begin to roll this out to a number of different categories progressively. Now, this case study is specifically around food safety. So how does a 2D barcode help a retailer or a brand improve food safety? In this particular case, they've been rolling out 2D barcodes to meat, poultry, deli, and salads, okay? And they've been using a code called GS1 data matrix. It's not a QR code. It looks very much like a QR code, but we call it a GS1 data matrix. And as well as having the G team, that's basically the product ID, they also have been beginning to embed a best before date and a batch number inside that 2D barcode. And so what happens is when you scan this at point of sale, your point of sale system can recognize the expiry date or the best before date on the product and can prevent the sale of expired products at point of sale. So they've rolled this out now to approximately 500 SKUs. There's about 20 suppliers involved. Most of it is private label. About 90% of this is private label. 10% is branded product, but it's not just private label, which is interesting, right? So already branded products are beginning to adopt this technology. So significantly increasing food safety. So once again, you have a best before date inside the code of the product. So the processes that you as a retailer have to undertake across the entire store to look at products that are coming close to their expiry date and apply quick sell stickers, like reduce stickers, all that sort of stuff can be automated. You just basically scan the code, a sticker comes up, you apply. Nobody has to read the barcode. Nobody has to turn around the product trying to figure out where that expiry date is and make a decision. So it significantly decreases the time, and I think it's about 25% productivity in managing those quick sell processes at point of sale. And basically means that products that are coming past their expiry date can basically flow through the store faster. So they've reported 40% reduction in food waste on the product categories that have been transitioned towards 2D barcodes. Anti-counterfeit, here's just one example of an infant formula manufacturer in Australia exporting products into China. We all know the stories around counterfeit products in China, particularly in this product category. I'm not going to get into it. Suffice it to say that by engaging smart technology companies like the ones that we have represented here, we managed to leverage 2D barcodes to provide an ability for consumers in China to be able to authenticate that the products were in fact the genuine article. So it can also be used for product counterfeit. And finally, for traceability. I'm not going to talk too much about this case study because we're going to be discussing it in a great sense of detail. But here's an example of an industry association, the Australian Table Grapes Association, partnering with government, with smart technology companies, implementing end-to-end traceability processes, both in the domestic as well as in the cross-border markets, across a number of different economies. It was not just one country. Being able to track and trace the product all the way from the farm through to the consumer's hand, capturing valuable feedback to the farmer. Never seen before, right? The farmers typically don't get any feedback. This technology now allows the farmer to interact directly with consumers of their products around the world. And also being able to monitor the quality of those grapes to make sure that the product that is arriving, whether it be in Vietnam or in Thailand, is absolutely tip-top, representing the brand Australia that we all want to have in international markets. So much so that it's also won this year an award from the World Packaging Organization, but we'll cover this example in a lot more detail. Now, this is not for me to present to you today, it's for you to use later when you get the slides, but it's a demonstration basically on how 2D barcodes work. On the left-hand side, you have a fictitious product, a risotto, and it has a 2D barcode with GS1 digital link. You can scan it, and you can get an idea of what the consumer experience is by using that technology. If you go to the one on the right-hand side and you scan that barcode, you get to a page where we have some demonstration apps. You can use those demonstration apps to scan the same barcode on the product and get a completely different experience. So whether you're a consumer using the Woolworths app and scanning that same product, you can have a completely different experience than scanning the one that comes from the brand. If you are an employee at Woolworths replenishing a shelf and you scan the product, you get a completely different experience from the same code. If you're a government agency, perhaps checking things at the border, you can scan that same barcode with a different app and you get a completely different experience. So have a look, play around. If you have any questions, please do reach out. Okay, almost there. Victor Hugo said, life is a flower for which love is the honey. So my final message to you is that 2D barcodes is the honey for packaging. So let's keep them all up. Thank you so much.